Hey guys, I wanted to talk about the importance of staying clean of all things whilst you're in withdrawal, tapering, or harmed and you're in protracted. It's so easy, even if you've been going through this for a long time, and let's say you're actually feeling way better and you've got some windows happening, but then maybe you'll get a wave again, another window, or perhaps you're just fresh into windows. It's so easy to be like, oh my God, I'm back to normal. And then go back to drinking alcohol, drinking caffeine, sugar, supplements, all sorts of things, digestive enzymes, especially if we're harmed in all sorts of ways. As we know, this can affect our digestion, it can affect so many things. And we really want to take care of our bodies and we really want to fill our bodies with anything that will help. And I totally get that. And I was there and I have been there many times where I'm like, maybe I should try that because maybe that would help with this. But I have learnt through severe setbacks and trial and error that actually the the best thing to do is to keep it completely clean. I love how I speak about that, and I've got like this sharp, jagged feeling in my throat. The best thing is to keep it completely clean, because why not? Right? Like nothing is worse than akathisia, and nothing is worth akathisia or akathasia. I never know how to pronounce it or spell it. I am dyslexic. So if you see my posts sometimes and they've got typos on them, that is why. So yeah, there's just nothing is worth or worse than that, and going back into a setback and having that feeling of like, oh my God, am I going to get out of this? Because this is happening again. It's so triggering as well when you get to a good baseline or a good place and then something happens and you're back in a wave. Also, though, it's really hard to avoid waves sometimes, especially if something just happens, like a stressful event in your life, and there's no way of controlling that. And I just want, if that's you, compassion. The setback will pass. Compassion. Take care of yourself. We do not know what is going to cause a setback sometimes, but there are things that we do know, and that is alcohol, caffeine, supplements, anything additional. Anything that you can think is going to have some sort of change to your biochemistry or your nervous system. When you think about it logically and you're like, okay, let's just unpack this. Even though I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, disclaimer, but sometimes you think, well, do they know? Because what is this mess? And when you end up in it, it's really scary. There are lots of things that we need to avoid, and I did do a setbacks video, so please do watch that, where I list so many, because also on my Instagram at the Psychomed Sanctuary, there's a couple of posts I've done there, setbacks and setbacks too, and people have commented in the messages and the comments things that have given them a setback, because often we don't know until we've actually tried the thing. You know, so many people, when I was going through it, would suggest things as well, because people want to do that. They're like, oh, why don't you try this? This is really good for the nervous system, or this is really good for this. And in withdrawal, unfortunately, the horrendous irony of this is like not much helps, but time and staying alive whilst you're in withdrawal, managing to not take on anything else, giving yourself loads of setbacks and just allowing it to take its course. That is the way that I see people coming back from this. And obviously I had a reinstatement. So my situation and my story is very complex, and we all have very complex histories in this, because what often happens is you go to the doctor with all these symptoms and all they want to do is give you more medication. And I was one of those people that ended up on so much medication and through 3 psychiatric units and just the whole thing. And it's just a miracle that I'm here. So I do know, and I experienced firsthand trying other stuff. I mean, I literally had like a desk covered in supplements, you know, just trying anything I could to help my system, because you feel so damaged. You feel like you're dying in this and you want to help your body. But I assure you, in withdrawal, the most help that you can do is to keep everything clean. Water, food. Water, food, sleep. Now I know, and I'm laughing because it's just so ridiculous, because those are three basic human needs that actually in withdrawal are very difficult to like even do, is to take care of yourself because you're in such a bad way. So I do know, just do the best you can in the moment, because that's all we can do. But sleep. So obviously I do speak to people who, wow, I mean, there's this guy, it's bad. And he's really, really, really close to, not being here anymore because his body just can't keep up with the insomnia and the akathisia. And for some people, it can sort of get to this very decline place. And I think when it's like that, and I was there, so the reason why that happened to me, by the way, is because I was CT'd, polydrugged, like just initially straight switches of things. There was just an absolute mess, right, of everything you could possibly imagine happened to me. So I want to say that this doesn't have to be your story, but there are people, and if this is you, where, now what I've really noticed and observed, I'm not a guru, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not this is a disclaimer, basically, that I'm just sharing what I've observed, because we're all learning in this. And I think it's really important we share what we observe. So I've noticed that if you are close, like, and you're literally, I mean, okay, your body is going to give up if you don't do something. That is a moment where intervention has to be, I mean, you have to have intervention if you're going down that route. Because if I hadn't been given in the psychiatric units quetiapine and mirtazapine, now I don't know why I had to have two, but anyway, one of them probably would have done, because they're very sedative and they make you sleep. And initially, when I was given those drugs in the psychiatric units in the acute phase of the first 3 months, they didn't put me to sleep. Nothing settled me. Nothing sedated me. I was just like this. It was 6 months that I was then given, 6 months into this horrendous withdrawal, or this polydrugging withdrawal from lorazepam, I was given quetiapine and mirtazapine together, and they really put me to sleep. Now, there was something about that in my intuition, because I mean, there was a moment, sort of 4 months into the withdrawal, where I hadn't slept at all because of this polydrugging and the CTing and everything, and it was just awful, that I stopped eating, and I went into psychosis. I couldn't drink water. It was painful to eat. I couldn't do anything. My body was just literally collapsing. I was collapsing. And if I hadn't been put into hospital and rehydrated in that moment, I mean, be it all the drugs they were giving me were making me feel crazy and horrendous, I just would have died, and I would not be here. So if you're there and it's like, this is really, really, really bad, you know what I mean? Then it's like, well, okay, what option is there, kind of thing. And that's where I was. And so not great to be put on mirtazapine, quetiapine, but they did make me sleep. And it was something about that sleep that I had for 2 months before I reinstated that lorazepam dose at 0.5 mg. Something about that synergy just seemed to bring me back to a baseline. So I want to say that, but I also just want to really stress that is not always the way. Like, let's say you come off an antidepressant and you're in withdrawal, you haven't been polydrugged, and a benzodiazepine, and it's pretty straightforward, right? There isn't any other polydrugging or mess, or you're not, I want to say, you're going to be feeling horrific, but you're not at death's door, and you're not stopping eating and stopping drinking fluids and everything like that, you know what I mean? Then it is this thing of time, because we don't know if adding another medication in that moment is actually going to help you, because what I found is actually they did add to the symptoms, but because I was so bad, it was like, you know what I mean? I was like going in a psychosis, being sectioned, like I was in this very helpless state. So yeah, if you're at home and you're like just in withdrawal, and it's been months, it's been years, and you're just wondering when this is going to stop, that's the moment where it's like, okay, stay away from anything you can, to put in the body. Like, as soon as I got that better baseline, I then had to taper off 3 medications. I was still very harmed. I still really I was so deeply sensitive. I got a setback from Reiki, which is like energy healing with the hands. I got a month setback from that. I got a setback from frequency music. I got a setback from food. Accidentally having a coffee, stress. And before that, it was just an absolute mess. So I was given so much stuff. It was very hard to know in the end, but I was pushed to that very, very close to death situation because I was given so much in the withdrawal and it doesn't help, So the way that I've healed until now is definitely because I've kept it really clean. I've not added anything else. I've taken the medication that I'm on. I've been slowly tapering very sensibly, 10% cuts, all that kind of thing, feeling out when it's right to taper, water tapering, dry cutting. I've been doing it all. Sometimes my words get really muddled, and this is something that's happened since all of this, is that I sometimes just can't speak properly. So if I'm muddling and going blah, 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 and saying words weirdly, it is from this. Anyway, I'm on my last medication, mirtazapine. I'm down to 9.5 milligrams from 30. I cannot believe I'm here from the before. But I just really wanted to do this video because I speak to so many people who are adding things, and because they're in withdrawal and in that horrendous state, and you're just panicked, you're desperate, you want to take anything to take this away. You're going to this specialist, that specialist, you're going to all these doctors, they're telling you, oh, just take this, take that, oh, you'll be fine, oh, that's not going to do anything, oh, don't be ridiculous. There is no such thing as not being ridiculous. There is no such thing as being too ridiculous in withdrawal. And, the amount of times it was a real lesson for me in boundaries, because yeah, that's a whole other story. But to have boundaries and to be like, no, I'm not going to have that glass of wine because that's going to harm me. Because before, obviously, you can get this pressure, can't you? This peer pressure from people or people's reaction. Or if you say that you can't have that kind of food. I can't have foods full of histamine. That's just, I can't eat that. When people are weird about that and just like make you feel like you're crazy and that you're making it all up, it's very easy to just give in and then have the food. Therefore, you're in a setback. There's just, I really know how hard it is. And it's been a real journey for me to be like, no, line on the ground. Nothing is worth akathisia, however you pronounce that. It's the most horrendous symptom. There's so many horrendous symptoms, but that one is really, 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 really bad. And, a setback can cause that. You could go out and have a sip of beer. And it could be that maybe you're like me, 4 years into this. You're actually pretty okay. Well, I say that I've actually got very bad head pain today because I recently tapered my mirtazapine. And so I'm still experiencing things and I have to be really, really careful. But say you're like that and you're like, well, I've been quite all right. I do get mild symptoms now and again, but it's been 4 years. Like, surely it's fine. And then you go out and have a glass of wine and actually it's really not fine. And you're right back into withdrawal. And I hear that is possible. And for me, I've decided I will never drink again. Nothing is worth akathisia. Nothing. And I think this is such a, it's a long journey for our nervous systems to heal, but they do heal, but it's invisible. So we can't see the healing. We also can't see that how damaged we might still be, even though we feel like, oh, I feel all right. But then something will happen, maybe something stressful in my life, and then I'll get some weird symptoms again. And I'm like, okay. Like this morning I woke up and I get this thing with my ears at the moment with mirtazapine. And it's like, it feels like my ears are like, it's horrible. Oh, if I tune into it too much, then it freaks me out. And this feeling of like dissociation or derealization. Sometimes I can kind of get pockets of that. And so it's just these things that can happen, and your system's very, very delicate. And so I still have to be so careful. even though I don't have akathisia, I'm sleeping, I'm functioning, but I'm also incredibly delicate. And so we just need to remember that, like when we're tapering, when I get off this drug, like 2 years after that, I've got to really be mindful of how delicate I need to be. No coffee, no alcohol. Like for me, it's just stay clean. You just don't know. You just don't know. I hope that is useful. That's how I've been living my life. And actually, I don't know whether this is a silver lining, but obviously we grab for things like alcohol, we grab for things like caffeine, chocolate, sugar. And I was definitely one of those people that, I loved my wine at night. I loved my coffee in the morning. I love chocolate and cake and all those kind of things. But then obviously what's behind that? What's behind that need? And it's interesting how it's put a serious line on the floor. Well, we definitely can't have those things. So that perspective is really interesting, because it's like before I'd be like, oh, I can't not have my wine. I can't not have chocolate today. Like I need to go and have the chocolate. Whereas now the line is on the ground, because it's either like, you know what I mean, horrendous symptoms or functioning. And so it's just like, cool, well, that's just been taken off the table. I can just go on with my life. So it's really interesting. It's definitely a lesson of perspective. Anyway, I just really hope that was useful, and that I know how hard this is and how easy it is to be like, I'm healed, and then start having all the stuff that you had before, coffees, chocolate. But actually all of this has an accumulative effect on the system, and you might all of a sudden end up in a setback or a wave and be like, why am I in a wave? And I see that a lot, and it's really hard for people, especially, okay, I'll end on this. Things like the contraceptive pill for women. This is something that, when we're in withdrawal, harmed, or we feel like we're healed, but then we take the pill, and that's quite a big chemical. That's like a hormonal chemical. That is definitely, it's definitely possible to be given a setback. So my brain sometimes just doesn't compute, but it's getting there. So that's also one that I really hear about a lot in this. And also it's just like that amalgamation of the hormones and the withdrawal and like the pill and the antidepressant, and just that going like this, and you're just like, oh my God. So yeah, the less medication in your life, once this has happened to you, the better. Because I do feel like once this has happened to you, we are really sensitive, and as much as you can to go through life without going down the medication route for as long as you can. Operations. I had to have an operation, and I dragged this out. I stretched this out for as long as I could. I was so terrified because I got this abscess in one of the psychiatric units in my bum cheek, and the only way to get rid of it was an operation. And I was literally looking up the sky, and I was like, oh my God, like I've already gone through this. How the hell am I going to go through an operation whilst I'm tapering and healing and a withdrawal? It was interesting, but I did my research, and I got my UK psychiatrist to write a letter to say that this has happened to me, and I do have harm in my system, bind, benzodiazepine-induced neurological disorder. Obviously, if it's an antidepressant, antipsychotic, you can say that, antipsychotic withdrawal, antidepressant harm, nervous system harm. However they want to describe it, he will know, or they will know. And I got that letter because they love a letter. And I went in and I had this operation, and I didn't have certain drugs, and the certain drugs that were left out. So I had fentanyl to put me to sleep. I did not have any benzodiazepine. Propofol, I cannot pronounce that, but that's also another general anesthetic. Propofol. I'm not a doctor, and I'm dyslexic, and it's really hard to pronounce some of these words. Anyway, so there's ways of avoiding anti-sickness. So when they give you an IV, I was terrified because I was like, what are they going to put in this IV without asking me? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, you've really got to be militant and be like, what are you putting in there? It's very important. I need to know. Anti-sickness, I was told, thank God, by somebody, because I put it on my Instagram that I was having an operation, anti-sickness. Do not let them give you anti-sickness, because they give anti-sickness for the general anesthetic. So when you wake up, you don't feel sick. I don't care. I'd rather feel sick than have akathisia. So I didn't have that. I had the operation. It went okay. My body was definitely affected. Like my tinnitus rose. There were certain things that definitely like sort of increased, but I was okay. And I've spoken to a lady recently. I'm just going to check my laptop is still on. It is. I spoke to a lady recently who had a horrendous situation with the anti-sickness and had a reaction from that. So it's just really, there are ways of, if you really need to go into hospital and have an operation, there are ways around this, and just to know that there is. And, you know, when they want to give you antibiotics for things, for example, God, I could go on forever, but it's just like more and more, you know, you start remembering, like I had a wisdom tooth that started to come through literally like a year after kind of getting a better baseline from this reinstatement. And I was like, oh my God, seriously? So I went in and I spoke to a fellow withdrawal taper buddy, Hans, who I really, really trust. And he said, look, they're going to want to give you antibiotics even before you've had the thing out. My sort of advice would be, don't take the antibiotics, have the tooth out. If it gets infected, if it looks like it's going to get infected, take the antibiotics. But they love to give you these antibiotics or these kind of like before it's even happened. And I noticed that like about this as well, this abscess I had, like they wanted to give me so many antibiotics and they gave me 3. And so I was really careful about which ones I took. I did a lot of research. I actually took 1. So after I had this abscess sort of sorted, they gave me 3 antibiotics. And I thought to myself, I can't put that in my body. No. And I could feel my body was like really sensitive after the operation. So I decided after a lot of umming and ahhing and you know, which one, to go for one of them. And I healed up absolutely fine and everything was okay. So yeah, it's just knowing that actually they throw medication at us and actually often we don't need it. The tooth healed. It did not get infected. Now, I know these things can get infected, and that's my story, and everyone's going to be so different. But just to let you know that that is an option. And so when you go into a doctor and they say, well, you're going to have to go on a course of antibiotics now, just know that actually you don't. And the risk of you or us doing that in a harmed place is like the risk of life and death. And so we really have to remember that boundary in ourselves, because no one else is going to put it in there, because doctors don't, you know, they'll deny it, and as will your friends and family and everyone, because this isn't spoken about. So I'm here helping you, I hope, to put the boundary in. Boundaries. Massive lesson for boundaries for me. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Love.